consequences are profound, and the costs will be very, very high. Mr. President, I thank you and thank the senator from Arkansas for his indulgence with the extra time, and I yield the floor.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
President, I take this time to comment on a vote that took place earlier this week that the people of this nation are having a hard time understanding why the Republicans are filibustering legislation that will allow us to consider job growth in America. It's a filibuster, and it happens so frequently in this body that it seems to be standard operating procedures for the Republicans. But in this case, I think the American public realize they've gone too far. We've got to create more jobs. We've got to create more jobs so that our economy can grow. There are millions of Americans that are out there seeking work and can't find jobs. And they need work in order to support their families. We need more jobs for our economy to grow. And we got into a debate in August about what we were going to do about raising the debt ceiling, and we're all concerned about the deficits that this country has. And yes, we are concerned that our current deficits are not sustainable, but we will not have a budget that is sustainable unless we have more jobs. And you can look at all of the programs to reduce government spending or to try to bring in more revenues. If we don't create more jobs, we're not going to be able to get our budget into a semblance of order. The reason for that is quite simple, Mr. President. The more people that are out of work, the more reliant they are upon government services, the less taxes that are paid in to pay our bills. So for the sake of those who are seeking employment, for the sake of our economy, for the sake of our budget, we've got to create more jobs. So we had a vote this week on moving forward on S-1660, the President's Jobs Initiative. It was a motion to proceed. It was a motion to bring the bill to the floor so that we could get into a debate about the best way to create jobs. Many of us thought that we would have amendments that would enhance and improve the President's package. The President's package was a starting point for our debate. But the Republicans said, no, we're going to filibuster even the opportunity for us to consider jobs legislation. They wouldn't even allow us to move forward. Now, Mr. President, we had a majority of the Senate. We had enough votes to pass it, or at least to proceed, if it was a simple majority, which is what most democracies believe is what democracy believes is the right standard. But no, we had a filibuster that didn't allow us even to consider the jobs bill on the floor of the United States Senate. What I find that most surprising, when you take a look at the President's proposal, the individual provisions have bipartisan support. This isn't a Democratic proposal. Every one of the provisions that the President included in his package had bipartisan support. The Congressional Budget Office said that the President's proposal would actually reduce the deficit and would create jobs. And it's been validated by the outside experts. Mark Zandi, the chief economist at Moody's, said, and he was also, by the way, the economic advisor to Senator McCain during the 2008 presidential campaign, he said, and I quote, this is talking about the President's plan. The plan would add 2 percentage points to our gross domestic product. Next year, add 1.9 million jobs and cut the unemployment rate by a full percent. And there are many others. Macroeconomics advisors said that the President's package would boost the level of GDP by 1.3% by the end of 2012, another 0.2% by the end of 2013. In other words, we're moving in the right way. And then going on to say we'll raise non-farm establishment employment by 1.3 million by the end of 2012 and 0.8 million by the end of 2013. The Economic Policy Institute estimates that the President's job bill would create 2.6 million jobs over 2 years and protect an existing 1.6 million jobs. And the Republicans say we can't even talk about this on the floor. The majority shouldn't be able to at least bring this issue so that we could have a full debate on the floor of the United States Senate. The President's proposals included areas that I think there is strong bipartisan support to help small businesses. We all know that small businesses are the growth engine of America. That's where jobs are created. That's where innovation, most innovation, will take place. The proposal would help small businesses with new hires and their payroll and expensing investments so they have the incentive to go out and invest. in job growth. That's what was in the President's proposal, to help small businesses. In the President's proposal, we had a provision to help our veterans. We all talk about our warriors, our soldiers, who are out there every day protecting our values. They have represented America so brilliantly in international combat. And now they're coming home to America. They're coming home, and they can't find work, can't find a job. Well, the President's saying, let's help them. We all talk about doing what we can to help our warriors. Well, this bill did something tangible about it. And what do the Republicans do? They filibuster an opportunity to even talk about a bill that could help create more jobs. The proposal also provides for infrastructure. Infrastructure is building. It's rebuilding America. Democrats and Republicans agree on that. We've got to rebuild our bridges and our roads. Bridges are falling down. Roads are in desperate need of repair. Roads help provide economic growth for our country. It would help us rebuild America, create jobs through those who construct these new roads and bridges and electric grids, etc., but then also make America more competitive. It would help those who are unemployed in several ways. First, it would provide not just unemployment benefits, which are important because that helps families be able to keep their homes and keep their family together and helps our economy because that money is spent, but it also reforms the unemployment system so we train those who are out of work for jobs that are available. In many cases, as the presiding officer from Ohio knows, people who have lost their jobs are going to have to find employment in a different area. Well, the unemployment system should be reformed so that they could be trained for those types of jobs. That was in the proposal that the Republicans wouldn't even allow us to bring up. They filibustered rather than allowing the majority to bring forward a bill to help create jobs. And, Mr. President, the bill was paid for. Didn't increase the deficit. As I've indicated before, the Congressional Budget Office said it would actually reduce the deficit. I want to make the point I made earlier and underscore this. The motion to proceed was the starting point for the debate, the starting point. I had 3 amendments that I wanted to bring forward, and I'm going to talk very briefly about those 3 amendments that I think would have improved the President's bill. One would allow the Small Business Administration, the surety bond program. This is a program that allows small construction companies the ability to move forward with construction work, increase the surety bond program from $2 million to $5 million. It's an amendment that I offered to the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Now, let me tell you about the success of that program. As a result of increasing the surety bonds from $2 million to $5 million, we saw a jump of 36% in 1 year, 2010, in construction work for small businesses. That's quite a success story. Mr. President, guess how much money that cost the taxpayers of this country in direct costs? 0. No cost to the taxpayer. Well, my amendment would make that extension permanent. And it's bipartisan. Democrats and Republicans support it. I have another amendment that would expand the infrastructure work to include water projects. Water projects are in desperate need. We have a huge need to deal with the way we treat wastewater and our safe drinking water. My amendment would add $30 billion for infrastructure in our water projects, $20 billion to the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and $10 billion to the Safe Drinking Water Act. And then lastly, Mr. President, I want to talk about one more amendment, which is the cool roof bill that I filed with Senator Crapo, that would change the depreciation schedule for those businesses that put on modern roofs that are energy efficient, create 40,000 jobs, and help our energy policy. Another amendment that I cannot bring forward because the Republicans filibustered the motion to proceed, so we can't bring up the jobs bill. Well, the Americans want us to consider jobs legislation. I hope we find a way to do it. I can tell you that I'm going to continue to fight to create more jobs for America because that's America's future. Our economy depends upon it, and we need to continue to focus on how we can create more jobs for the American economy. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.
The senator from Nebraska is recognized.
Mr. President, I rise today to remember a fallen hero, U.S. Army National Guard Master Sergeant Christian Rigi. He and two fellow officers were killed when a gunman opened fire on a Carson City International House of Pancakes on September 6, 2011. This was a tragic event. It ultimately took the lives of 4 people and left hollow hearts from Nevada to Nebraska, where his father and mother and several relatives live. Master Sergeant Rigi enlisted in the United States Navy in 1992. As a career non-commissioned officer, Chris spent much of his time in uniform training young soldiers. He entered the Nebraska National Guard after his service in the Navy. Like many National Guard NCOs, he held more than one military occupational specialty. With experience as an infantry soldier and knowledge of mechanics and supply logistics, Chris set the high standard and trained soldiers to that standard. He excelled in physical fitness, and he was a natural teacher. He served a 22-month deployment in Fort Irwin, California, with the task of training units deploying for overseas contingency missions. Chris most recently served with the 1st of the 221st Cavalry in Afghanistan, earning his combat spurs during this tour. The decorations and badges earned over his distinguished career would include the Combat Action Badge, the Meritorious Unit Commendation, the Legion of Merit, the Meritorious Service Medal, the Army Commendation Medal, the Army Achievement Medal, the Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal, the Southwest Asia Service Medal, and the Afghanistan Campaign Medal. Chris is remembered now as a soft-spoken warrior with a love for fixing things. A fellow soldier and friend, Master Sergeant Paul Kinsey, made reference to his demeanor. Quote, "You can't just label him with one word or one phrase. Still waters run deep," unquote. The Rigi family laid their soldier to rest in Page, Nebraska on September 17, 2011. Today I join the family and friends of Master Sergeant Rigi in mourning the death of their son, father, fiancé, friend, and fellow soldier. Nebraska is honored to call him one of our own, and I know that both Nebraskans and Nevadans will surround this family during this very difficult time. As we honor this hero, may his children, Sarah, Erica, Cindy, Michael, always know the bravery with which their father served and the love that he had for them. May God bless the Rigi family and all of our servicemen and women, both here and abroad. Mr. President, I yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
last week I introduced legislation in the Senate that would prohibit the use of racial profiling by federal, state, or local law enforcement agencies. The End Racial Profiling Act, S. 1670, had been introduced in previous Congresses by our former colleague, Senator Russ Feingold of Wisconsin, and I am proud to follow his leadership. I want to thank my colleagues, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Durbin, Senator Gillibrand, Senator Kerry, Senator Lautenberg, Senator Levin, Senator Menendez, and Senator Mikulski, and Senator Stabenow for joining me as original co-sponsors of this legislation. Racial profiling is ineffective. The more resources that are spent investigating individuals solely because of their race or religion, the fewer resources are being directed at suspects actually demonstrating illegal behavior. Former Department of Homeland Security Secretary Michael Chertoff stated in response to a question about the December 2001 bomb attempt by Richard Reed that the problem is that profile many people think they have of what a terrorist is doesn't fit the reality. And in fact, one of the things the enemy does is to deliberately recruit people who are Western in background or in appearance so that they can slip by people who might be stereotyping. Racial profiling diverts scarce resources from real law enforcement. In my own state of Maryland in the 1990s, the ACLU brought a class action suit against the Maryland State Police for illegally targeting African American motorists for stops and searches along Maryland's highways. The parties ultimately entered into a federal court consent decree in 2003 in which they made a joint statement that emphasized in part the need to treat motorists of all races with respect, dignity, and fairness under the law is fundamental to good police work and a just society. The parties agreed that racial profiling is unlawful and undermines public safety by alienating communities. Racial profiling demonizes entire communities and perpetuates negative stereotypes based on an individual's race, ethnicity, or religion. I agree with Attorney General Holder's remark to the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, where he stated that in this nation, security and liberty are at their best partners, not enemies, in ensuring safety and opportunity for all. In this nation, the document that set forth the supreme law of the land, the Constitution, is meant to empower, not exclude. Racial profiling is wrong. It can leave a lasting scar on communities and individuals, and it's quite simply bad policing, whatever city, whatever state. Using racial profiling makes it less likely that certain affected communities will voluntarily cooperate with law enforcement and community policing efforts. Minorities living and working in these communities may also feel discouraged from traveling freely, and it corrodes public trust in government. I want to thank the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights for their endorsement of this legislation. Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent that the endorsement letter of September 14, 2011, from over 50 different organizations be placed in the record at this point.
Without objection. So ordered.
The bill I introduced last week, the End Racial Profiling Act, would build on the Department of Justice's current guidelines regarding the use of race by federal law enforcement agencies issued in 2003. This official Department of Justice guidance certainly was a step forward, but it does not have adequate provisions for data collection and enforcement for state and local agencies. The Department of Justice guidance also does not have the force of law. The legislation I introduced would prohibit the use of racial profiling by federal, state, or local law enforcement agencies. This bill clearly defines racial profiling to include race, ethnicity, national origin, or religion as a protected classes. It requires training of law enforcement officers to ensure that they understand the law and its prohibitions. It creates procedures for receiving, investigating, and resolving complaints about racial profiling. It would apply equally to federal, state, and local law enforcement, which creates consistent standards at all levels of government. Mr. President, the vast majority of our law enforcement officers that put their lives on the line every day handle their jobs with professionalism, diligence, and fidelity to the rule of law. However, Congress and the Justice Department can still take steps to prohibit racial profiling and root out its use. I look forward to working with my colleagues to enact this very important legislation. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The junior senator from Nevada is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I rise today to address the economy as it affects my hometown, or my home state of Nevada. This recession has hit my home state of Nevada harder than it's hit any other state in the country. My state has the unfortunate distinction of leading the nation in unemployment, foreclosure, and bankruptcy. As we discuss yet another stimulus this week, I hear from my friends on the other side of the aisle their claim that their priorities are jobs, jobs, jobs. And I have one question about their economic policies. Is this working? Mr. President, in January of 2009, President Obama was inaugurated as President of the United States. Democrats controlled both the House and the Senate. And Nevada's unemployment rate at that time was 9.4%. The next month, stimulus was passed. Supporters claimed that the national unemployment level would not rise above 8% if you passed the stimulus bill. And Nevada's unemployment at that time then grew from 9.4% to 10.1%. In June of 2009, Congress passed the Cash for Clunkers. The Nevada unemployment then raised at that point from 10.1% to 12%. With the success of Cash for Clunkers 1, we passed Cash for Clunkers 2. Following that, in August, Nevada's unemployment rose from 12% to 13.2%. Then in March of 2010, Congress passed the President's health care law. Nevada's unemployment rose again from 13.2% to 13.4%. In July of that year, Congress then passes the Dodd-Frank reform of the financial services industry that effectively limited access to capital both for individuals and small businesses, and Nevada's unemployment rate went from 13.4% to 14.3%. In fact, if you go back to May of 2010, Nevada overtakes Michigan as the state with the highest unemployment rate at 14%. With the passage of Dodd-Frank, it then rises again to 14.3%. Then we have the state bailout in August of 2010. Stimulus number 2, and Nevada's unemployment rate rose again to 14.4%. So after 14.4%, due to the lack of economic activity in Nevada, some people in Nevada have stopped looking for work, or worse, some Nevadans have actually left the state for employment elsewhere. This resulted in Nevada's unemployment dipping from 14.4% to 13.4%. So I guess I raised the question a second time, have these economic policies worked? There was a local paper that had a reader's poll, and the question of this reader's poll is Nevada's economy recovering. Those who responded, 82% said no. So regardless of what Washington, D.C. is trying to tell them, 82% of Nevadans understand that the economic recovery has not occurred yet in the state of Nevada. One of my constituents recently wrote, says, "I'm writing you today because I'm outraged over the stimulus proposal that President Obama is trying to intimidate you into passing. Despite the evidence that the first 2 stimulus plans have failed, despite the promises that there were shovel-ready jobs, despite the other false promises that the first $1 trillion would upgrade our infrastructure, keep unemployment under 8%, despite the overwhelming evidence that nearly $1 trillion in taxpayer dollars were completely wasted in the first stimulus, This president had the audacity to demand that you immediately pass another $500 billion worth of stimulus. In capitalization, do not do it. So it is clear that the approach of this administration and its supporters have taken for economic recovery have failed miserably. Another stimulus bill is not the solution. We now have a string of economic policies that are big on talking points, light on solutions. People from all over the country are struggling just to get by and are desperate for real solutions. It's time for new ideas and a new direction, not more of the same. Out-of-control spending, a health care law that no one can afford, and a seemingly endless stream of regulations are crippling employers, stifling economic growth, and killing jobs. The American public and businesses alike are awaiting a plan that can provide the stability and certainty necessary to provide confidence to the American people and bolster economic growth. I hear from some of my friends on the other side of the aisle claims that there are no ideas of job creation coming from Republicans. Since coming to the Senate, I have repeatedly filed job-related amendments when given the opportunity, but have yet to see an open debate on any of these amendments. So if it's true that there are no ideas coming from Republicans, then there is nothing to fear from an honest, real debate on jobs. Instead of symbolic votes and political grandstanding, let's actually do the difficult work and address this problem. As I suggested to President Obama, Nevada needs a proposal that reforms the tax code, stops excessive government spending, and provides the certainty businesses need to hire. Instead, the administration and the Senate majority has recycled the same failed policies, but this time increases taxes on the same businesses we need to create jobs. There are a number of actions Congress can take immediately to bolster our nation's economy, such as opening up our country to energy exploration, streamlining the permitting process for responsible development of our domestic resources, reforming our tax code, making it simpler for individuals and businesses alike, cut out the special interest loopholes while reducing the overall tax burden for all Americans. Instead of looking for new ways to tax the American public and our job creators, we should make our tax code more competitive and provide businesses the stability that they need to grow and create jobs. As I have stated before, this continual threat of tax increases feeds the uncertainty that serves as an impediment to economic growth. These are all things that both this administration and Congress could do immediately to boost economic recovery. I came to Washington to make a difference. Let's start doing the hard work we were sent here to do. Mr. President, I yield the floor. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
President, I would ask unanimous consent to speak up to 15 minutes.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, thank you. I'm here on the floor today to share a few thoughts on a topic that has a daily impact upon the lives of Americans. It's the topic that we've had front and center now for a long time, job creation. Whether or not a mom or dad can find a job directly impacts their ability to put food on their family's table, pay their mortgage, save for their children's education, and prepare for their own retirement. In August, our economy failed to create any jobs, and in September, our economy created about 100,000 jobs, but that is not fast enough to get us out of our economic slump. In fact, the fact is that 14 million Americans are still out of work, and about 42% of those unemployed have been looking for a job for more than 6 months. We know those facts. Over the last few weeks, I've asked Kansans what their thoughts are about this circumstance, and we find many Kansans, as we know in America, people are discouraged, looking for work, unable to find a job, and they want to know why our businesses aren't creating those jobs and making them available for them. I recently had the opportunity to sit down with Kansans who own businesses in Overland Park, a suburb of Kansas City, and in Hutchinson, a community just outside of Wichita, to talk about the economy and their outlook for our economic future. Throughout our conversations, it became clear that the one main reason businesses aren't hiring is because of economic uncertainty. In fact, a survey conducted by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce indicated more than half of small business executives cited economic uncertainty as the greatest obstacle to hiring more employees. From business owners' perspective, I can understand why they are reluctant. Because if they don't know how much they will have to pay in taxes or to comply with additional regulations a year from now, or how much health care costs will be for any new employee, why would they hire a new employee now or invest in their business? Any successful business owner will tell you that you have to take risks to get ahead, but they will also tell you that you have to balance those risks against your expected costs or you'll run your business into the ground. One chief executive put it this way: what are the rules of the game going to be in the long term? What our retailers would like to have is consistency and predictability. We can handle decisions we don't agree with, but that's easier than not knowing what the decision is going to be. Another executive of a small business put it very plainly: among the other presidents and CEOs I interact with, the only consensus of opinion is none of us have any idea where things are going. In my observation, the uncertainty we are experiencing is caused almost entirely out of Washington and other governments around the world. The reality is the private sector has been the engine of job creation in our country throughout history. So we should do everything we can to encourage business to create jobs. In fact, small businesses represent 99.7% of all employer firms and employ half of all private sector employees, according to the Small Business Administration. And in the last 2 decades, they've generated 65% of the new jobs created in our country. One of the greatest opportunities we have to improve someone's life is to create an environment where jobs can be created so employers can feel confident about investing in their companies and they can put people to work. Today, I want to outline a new approach, one that's based on a proven track record of success, the success of the American entrepreneur. Soon, I will be introducing legislation called the Startup Act to help jumpstart our economy through the creation and growth of new businesses. The American dream is based on the principle that anyone can achieve success given the freedom and opportunity to make a better life for themselves and their families. America has long been known as the land of opportunity where individuals risk all they have to live out their dreams. Many Fortune 500 companies like Ford and Apple, General Electric, all got their start with a handful of folks, an individual, a great idea, and a lot of hard work. Many of our businesses started in garages across our country. So we should continue to encourage this spirit of entrepreneurship in our nation. In Kansas City, there's a foundation dedicated to the promotion of entrepreneurship called the Kauffman Foundation. Their research shows that between 1980 and 2005, companies less than 5 years old accounted for nearly all the new job growth in the United States. In fact, new firms create about 3 million jobs each year. For 45 years, the Kauffman Foundation has worked to strengthen opportunities for entrepreneurs in this country, so when a person comes up with a good idea, they can pursue it and turn it into reality. Many of their good ideas are reflected in the legislation I will soon be introducing and are based upon Kauffman's extensive research and analysis. The foundation of the Startup Act is based on 5 pro-growth principles: removing barriers to growth, attracting business investment, bringing more research from the laboratory to the marketplace, attracting and retaining entrepreneurial talent, and encouraging pro-growth in state and local policies. First, the Startup Act will remove barriers to growth by streamlining federal regulations. Rather than hiring new employees, businesses are spending money on complying with unreasonable and sometimes regulations not based upon sound science. New businesses face an especially heavy burden in complying with the multitude of local, state, and federal rules governing their business. According to the SBA, firms with fewer than 20 employees spend 36% more per employee than larger firms to comply with federal regulations. Very small firms spend 4.5 times as much per employee to comply with environmental regulations and 3 times more per employee on tax compliance than the largest corporations. When I met with those business leaders in Kansas City recently, one of them told me he was required to replace all the light bulbs in his factory because of an EPA regulation. But this factory has skylights and was already well lit. He didn't need new lighting, but the government told him he did, and this unnecessary regulation cost him tens of thousands of dollars. This is just an example of just how cumbersome and how costly regulations have become. That money could have and should have been, in my view, better spent on helping that business grow. The Startup Act will overhaul the federal regulatory process for all regulations that have an impact on the economy of $100 million or more by requiring these rules to undergo a cost-benefit analysis every 10 years. The benefit and burden on business and consumers will become much more clear. This will ease the burden on businesses so they can focus on growing their business and hiring more workers. Second, the Startup Act will help companies attract investment so they can get off the ground and grow more quickly. One of the greatest challenges for startups is having access to the necessary capital to grow their business. Investors' capital gains are currently taxed at 15%. Last year, the Small Business Jobs Act passed by Congress temporarily exempted taxes on capital gains from the sale of certain small business stock held for at least 5 years. The Startup Act will make this exemption permanent so investors have the incentive to partner with entrepreneurs and help provide financial stability for the first few years of that business beginning. Third, the Startup Act will make it easier to take research from the laboratory and apply it in the marketplace. Some of our brightest and most creative individuals study at American universities. Each day, faculty members, graduate students make new discoveries and develop new ideas. The possibilities of research are endless. In fact, university research led to groundbreaking discoveries such as polio vaccine, antibiotics, black and white television, barcodes, and more recently, email and Google. To help bring more cutting-edge research to the marketplace, my bill creates an incentive for universities to reform their technology policies and practices. The Startup Act requires the top federal R&D grant-making agencies to give preference to universities that have a proven track record of success in discovering commercial applications for their research. Fourth, this legislation will enable new businesses to attract and retain highly trained workers, including those who immigrate to our country. Our country was founded on immigrants who have long contributed to the strength of our economy by starting businesses and creating jobs. In fact, in 2007, a study found that more than a quarter of technology and engineering companies started in our country from 1995 to 2002 had at least one key founder who was born overseas. These companies produced $52 billion in sales and employed 450,000 workers in 2005 alone. Research shows that 53% of immigrant founders of U.S.-based technology and engineering companies completed their highest degree at an American, a United States university. Unfortunately, many foreign-born immigrants leave the States after they complete their studies and return to their home countries to start businesses because they have a hard time securing a visa to stay in the United States. It doesn't make much sense to make such an investment in these students and then not give them the opportunity to apply what they've learned by starting a company here in the United States that will generate jobs for other Americans. We should be doing all we can to attract and retain highly skilled and entrepreneurial folks so they can work in the field where they have studied and contribute to our economy. The Startup Act will help retain this talent in two ways. First, it creates a new visa called a STEM visa for any immigrant who graduates with a master's or Ph.D. in science, technology, or engineering or math. This will give those graduates the opportunity to stay for up to a year beyond their graduation date to find a job and put to work their high-tech skills they learned and that our economy so desperately needs. Second, the bill creates another visa called an entrepreneur's visa for immigrants who register a business and employ at least one non-family member within a year of obtaining that visa. Once they've satisfied those requirements, the entrepreneur would be allowed to remain here for an additional 3 years if they employ additional employees and further grow their business. The goal of both of these visas is to encourage innovation among highly skilled entrepreneurs and to help grow our country. Finally, the Startup Act would encourage pro-growth state and local policies. While federal policies certainly impact the formation and growth of a new business, state and local policies also play an important role in their creation and growth. In order to identify the states which are the most entrepreneur-friendly, this legislation will create State Startup Business Report to analyze state laws and policies. The report will encourage healthy competition and lead to the development and expansion of pro-growth policies. Our first priority, in conclusion, our first priority in Congress right now should be to create an environment that encourages companies to grow and create jobs. We know our economy cannot continue with the path it's on. In a recent Chamber of Commerce study, 64% of small business executives said they do not expect to add to their payroll in the next year, and another 12% said they plan to cut jobs. The Startup Act will encourage American entrepreneurs to do what they do best, dream big and pursue their dreams. The American economy can and will recover when we give American entrepreneurs the tools they need to succeed. By removing those barriers to growth for new companies, attracting business investment, bringing more research from the laboratory to the marketplace, retaining talented entrepreneurs and skilled employees, and encouraging pro-growth policies, we will spur growth in the marketplace and assist in putting people back to work. The ongoing debate about how to create jobs needs to turn from rhetoric to reality. Nothing in this legislation is designed to be highly partisan. It's designed to make certain that Republicans and Democrats can come together with a plan that will make a difference. It's time for Congress to put policies in place that give job creators more confidence and certainty in the marketplace. If we fail to act as we should, if we continue to ignore the economic problems facing our country, if we let partisanship and bickering get in our way, we will reduce the opportunities the next generation of Americans have to pursue the American dream. It's our greatest responsibility as citizens of our country to make sure the next generation of Americans can live in a country with freedom and liberty and have the opportunity to dream their dreams and see them fulfilled. I yield back. Mr. President, I note the lack of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Previous order, morning business.